Sigmund Freud's structural model of the mind, consisting of the id, ego, and superego, is often compared to an iceberg to illustrate the dynamic interplay between conscious and unconscious mental processes. Here is a brief explanation of each. The id. The id is the primitive and instinctual part of the mind that operates on the pleasure principle, seeking immediate gratification of basic needs and desires such as hunger, thirst, and sexual impulses. It is driven by unconscious urges and operates without regard for reality or consequences. The id is present from birth and operates on the basis of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. The ego. The ego is the rational and conscious part of the mind that develops in early childhood to mediate between the demands of the id, the constraints of reality, and the moral standards of the superego. It operates on the reality principle, balancing the desires of the id with the limitations of the external world. The ego seeks to satisfy the id's desire in a socially acceptable and realistic manner, taking into account consequences and long-term goals. The superego. The superego is the moralistic and idealistic part of the mind that develops during childhood under the influence of parental and societal values, norms, and moral standards. It represents the internalized rules, ethics, and conscience of society, striving for perfection and moral excellence. The superego evaluates the ego's actions, applying moral judgments and guilt for violating moral principles or social norms. In Freud's conceptualization, the interplay and conflict between the id, ego, and superego shape an individual's personality, behavior, and psychological functioning. A healthy balance and integration of these components contribute to adaptive functioning and psychological well-being, while imbalance or dysfunction can lead to psychological conflicts, defense mechanisms, and psychopathology. As it relates to pathological narcissists, you'll often hear me state that pathological narcissists are rooted in their shame and they are unable to move past their pride. So at this level of consciousness, we can call this victim abuser consciousness. We could call this the first, second, and third dimension. We can also state that this individual is stuck in their lower ego development. As it relates to the Hawkins scale and the lower ego development, this would be a similar equivalent to what Sigmund Freud is referring to as the id. So pathological narcissists are stuck at an unconscious level. They are stuck at the bottom of the scale. So they are stuck in a state where they are listening to their basic impulses. So we're talking about sex and aggression. So they are going to be seeking immediate gratification, and they're often irrational and impulsive because, again, they have severe psycho-spiritual arrested development. So whether we use the Hawkins scale or we use Sigmund Freud's model or we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they essentially are stating the same thing, that individuals that are stuck at the bottom are unable to ascend until they get these lower needs met. And as it relates to pathological narcissists, they are based in their shame and they are unable to move past their pride. So pride cometh before the fall, and they fall right back down to shame. Because again, we are talking about a severe type of psychological arrested development.